Well, JP, thank you for joining me on the channel today. Appreciate you making the trip over here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. For anybody that might not know you at this point, can you just, in your own words, explain who you are and who you make videos for?
Sure. I'm JP Knowledge. I make credit card and points and miles travel related content on my YouTube channel. And yeah, that's what I do. And I love traveling, redeeming points and miles, and been a big fan of doing it for a few years now. And I try to teach people what I know.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually don't know much about your backstory, as in like before you got onto the YouTube space. Can you kind of just explain how we got here today?
Yeah. So honestly, originally when it came to the world of credit cards, I was against it when I first started. Everyone I knew in college who had a credit card was in credit card debt. They all would just get credit cards and they would say that you get it to just use it and then you pay the 30% interest. And I was like, this is something I'm never going to get into.
Yeah.
So for a long time, I didn't have a credit card. And then what it was is I started looking at getting loans for cheap. I was trying to see what type of cheap. And then I saw that there was credit cards you could get 0 APR for 12 months or 15 months. And I was like, all right, let me get some of these, and did my research to make sure I wouldn't somehow have to pay interest, and then took advantage of them. And then after I saw that I had like cash back in my account from using the cards and spending $200 to get, or sorry, spending $500 to get $200. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then from there, it just went from me being just strictly cash back focused to becoming someone who found the world of points and miles. And then I just dived into that. So
yeah, what's the timeline look like on that? Like, I guess age wise, and how long have you been playing the credit card game, would you say?
Credit cards, I would say that I got a credit card in maybe 2013 or 14 was like my first credit card. And then when it comes to points and miles world, I'll say that I learned that it even, I guess, exists in like 2017, maybe right around there.
Okay.
And then I didn't start really getting like deeper into it until like 2019. But I would say that in like 2018, like roughly right around there, is when I started like looking into it. And I think a lot of people, what they do is they'll look into it for a while, but they won't actually book certain things or do certain stuff. So I was still focused on the cash back and using like my Discover It card and stuff like that. But then, yeah, then I started going, I want to travel more. And I really started focusing on actually how to make the redemptions work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too, because based on your timeline, I just see on YouTube specifically, I think you posted your first video about 7 years ago, a little bit over 7 years ago, but you started posting more consistently about credit cards about 4 to 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would line up pretty well there. What was like I guess you said you started with the cashback cards. What was the path that you took, one that you would actually recommend to others as well? Or is that kind of just like it happened?
Yeah, no, it worked perfectly for where I was at that time in my life. I was just focused on, hey, let me try to save money. Like the videos I made originally, like 7 years ago, I was doing like personal finance videos and things like that back then. So I was really more focused on that type of stuff. And I'm happy with what I was able to get, because at the time I wasn't really focused on travel. So if you are someone who does want to travel, then yeah, get into the world of the points and miles and try to figure out how to use it to redeem for good value. But not everyone's into that. And sometimes people just want to get themselves a few $100s here and there from their cash back. Or like, I remember I wanted a Movado watch. So I got the Saver card, got a $500 sign-up bonus, and bought myself a Movado watch. And I go, great. I didn't have to do anything other than spend my normal spend on the card. So it's not everyone has the same path, Yeah, right. Whatever you feel works for you, is that path can end up working out depending on where you are in life.
Gotcha. So a lot of people might be, they can resonate with that story of just like kind of stumbling into the credit card game and then falling in love with it in a sense. But what separates you in the sense of like what made you want to start making content about this? Because that's not the normal path that people go down.
Well, there's always people who say, stop talking about it. And when people tell me to stop talking about it, or not stop talking about it, but they would be like, all right, we hear you. Why don't you go make a YouTube channel? Because no one I don't know how many people in your regular life who know about points and miles, but I know pretty much like zero. The only people who know about it is people who I've told them, and they still don't really know that much. So they'd be like, make a YouTube channel. So that's kind of what it was, even when that made me kind of look into making it or start making YouTube content. But I think what made me start to want to do it was, even when it came to like the personal finance stuff, is sometimes I would see people and they would be making videos, and I'd watch their content and go, hey, I feel like I know as much as this person. Yeah. And if this person knows this much, why can't I make the content? So that's really what started me into it. And then I was like, yeah, I feel like I can be of some use to this space. So that's what got me into it.
Gotcha. And what you make content in a lot of different kind of, I guess, formats as well, right? What have you, or first of all, can you explain what those different formats are, and then which ones you like the most and why?
Yeah, so I make videos where I will just be going over cards. I make videos where I go into specifically like doing points and award bookings. And then I also do like some vlog videos where I'm actually traveling. So there's videos where I fly and show you a review of actually taking Japan Airlines in economy, in first class. You can see for yourself whether or not it really makes sense to pay the additional points to be able to book the luxurious seat, or if you're just like, yeah, the economy looks fine. So I like that because I want to be able to show people that it's not just, hey, I have these points and, I'm just having them and telling people I'm doing these trips. It's like, let me actually show you my experience with them. So yeah, I got a few different ways of making videos.
And then what about like long form versus short form versus written and all of that medium as well?
So I mainly do, I wouldn't say it's like longer form. I don't have any videos that are, I would say like over a half an hour. Even my longer videos tend to be the ones that are going to be more of like the vlogs. But typically when it comes to the content that I make, I write out, I would say like notes for a script, but I don't actually write out like a full thing that I just read off of. If I read off of something, it's just monotone. It's not going to come out great at all. So I usually write out notes, and it's typically things that I know. I just need to make sure that I have the bullet points to be able to do it. So I just go over those notes and then try to make my videos be, I usually want it, what I hope I can make for my videos is that when someone watches it, they feel like they got enough of the information as compared to, I've seen people's content where I'm like, I have to do more research. And I want someone to be able to go to my thing and go, I feel like I know that. So yeah.
That's great. So speaking of backstory here, we have a question from one of the members of the channel. Figured we should ask this up front. But what Chad Pennycuff asked is, JP, what's the backstory on all the fabulous hats? Can you drop us a link?
Yeah, I have a few different hats. I guess I'm in the bald club, so not everyone is fortunate to have the stallion hair like yourself. But I've worn hats since I was in high school. I would wear more fitteds, and as I got older, I just switched up to wearing different caps, and now I like to wear the fedora a lot of times when I'm traveling. So yeah, I don't know. This one I got it Nordstrom, but I got it for cheap. I actually went to the website of this thing, and they sell this thing for like $300.
Oh, wow.
At Nordstrom, I got it for like, I think it was $40 or something right around there.
Little side hustle, start flipping.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they messed up or there was an error with the price of the hat. So I just was like, took it off the mannequin. I was like, let me get it. And yeah, so.
Yeah. Now I think that's great. And obviously you look really nice here. I feel like I need to dress up a little bit more when I'm around you, but no, I love the hats, and I think it's one of the staples that people can kind of come back, and it's part of your branding now, which is pretty cool. But getting into like the credit card or just travel stuff more specifically here, can you describe for people your overall travel habits, like whether that be you're taking, aspirational trips mostly, domestic trips, or just kind of how you travel?
Yeah, so I would say that I do more domestic travel, although it might look like I'm just doing all this international travel, but reality is that like I go to closer places such as like so I'm currently now in Los Angeles, but like I grew up in Massachusetts, so I'll fly back to Mass, but I also go out to San Fran. I might go out to Vegas, go to all like these different places, and a lot of times when I travel domestically, I don't go to places for very long. So although it looks like, oh, I'm traveling for, I went to Miami, and you might think I was there for a week. I was there for a weekend, and then I might go to Dallas and things like that just for a few days. And then for my international travel, how it's kind of been more lately is it's been like I'll do like a couple of, I would say maybe bigger, like kind of further away international travel, whether it be to like Europe or to Asia. But I'm usually there for like, I would say close to a week at these places. And then I might do one to like Canada or Mexico, which is not too far. And then I can do something like that for maybe like 4 days as a trip. So yeah.
And how often are you actually traveling between the domestic and international?
I would say that domestic, I try to do it when I have a couple of days where I have it available. So if I see that, like, I started thinking about this, or I started kind of doing it this way after this YouTube channel called Tim and Finn, and they have like this thing called Trip Travel where they sell these different packing cubes and stuff like that as well. But they were talking about how they would go to places just for weekends when they had a couple of days off. And I heard them say that, and I was like, why don't I do that more frequently? So that's like, if I can, I'll try to do that in the US. I would say I'll do that in a month. Like, so I don't have anything planned for like the next couple months, but if all of a sudden I go, hey, you know what, there's good deals to go over to Atlanta, and it happens to be like a 3-day weekend or something like that, then I'll try to go over and do something like that. It's a place I haven't visited yet. But then for the international trips, I would say that I've mainly been planning it where it ends up being closer to like the fall, and then also like in like the spring, and usually summer I'm not really doing. I'm more in the US.
So a couple times a year doing bigger trips, 1 to 2 times a year bigger trips, and then almost every month or so domestic.
Try to, yeah. If I can.
Yeah.
So it'd be
That's
fun.
awesome. How do you earn enough points to actually travel like that? I think that's a common question most people getting started would want to know.
Yeah. So I've said before in some of my videos that there's 5 different ways of getting points that at least I go off of, where it ends up being the multipliers, ends up being welcome offers, referrals, shopping portals, which ends up also maybe being offers, and then spend that isn't yours. And I just try to focus on those things. And I do think that even though, yes, welcome offers is going to end up being the way that you can accumulate the most points the fastest for majority of people who don't have like a lot of business spend, it's still, people should focus on multipliers, because you'd be surprised at how many points you can end up earning from those multipliers as well at times when you're not working on the welcome offers. If you fly over to somewhere like Spain, you can get business class for, if you're on the East Coast, it ends up being, I think it's like 35,000 points. So you could do a round trip in business class for somewhere along the lines of like, 70,000 points. So being able to book that type of trip, you can do that just from normal spend for a lot of people. So that's the reason why when people are like, don't worry about the multipliers, I'm like, yeah, I get that the welcome offers are stronger. You still can get yourself a full trip possibly just from the multipliers as well. So, but all of those things are really the things I try to focus on. Obviously having a YouTube channel helps out with like referrals and things like that. And then, yeah.
Gotcha. What currencies do you see yourself utilizing the most?
Probably Chase Ultimate Rewards points, just because I like to stay at Hyatt a lot. So because of that, there's always going to be the drip of every time I go on a trip, I'm going to be looking for Hyatt hotels.
Yep.
Whereas American Express, they've now been factoring in more for some of my domestic travel with the kind of backed away with getting Alaska. But typically I redeem those for international travel. So because of that, there might be a decent period of time where I don't end up using American Express points, whereas Chase points, it seems like I'm constantly redeeming those.
Yeah, that's exactly the way that I travel as well. I need to do better at, even this trip, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but you helped me book this trip, and I use my American Express membership rewards points in a way that I hadn't before with that exact, transfer over to American effectively through a long chain there. But most of the time I'm just redeeming for 1.5 cent per point with my Chase Sapphire Reserve, which I still think is pretty good for domestic, just economy stuff. But there's a lot to be learned even in the domestic space, which is why I wanted to talk to you more about that here in a little bit. Do you have an estimation on how many points you actually redeem every year?
I don't. I probably should look more into that. I know you always have your videos where you have the whole spreadsheet, and I should try to do more things like that. But I don't really even. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better answer.
No, that's all good. I just wonder, because last year I did a lot of travel, a lot of domestic with like 2 international trips sprinkled in, and I redeemed like 1 million points. So I'm like, I wonder if you're anywhere near that. I would imagine you are near that, I should say, depending on how often you're traveling. And you do find more sweet spot redemptions and probably use a lot less points than I do, though. So
yeah, I would say because I was even thinking about it. My trip to Madrid, I think I spent under 200,000 points, and I was in Madrid for like a week. I was in Spain for like a week, and that included staying at a Hyatt hotel that was like 15,000 points for a bunch of nights, and then also the flights. So there are ways where you can get international travel, and it doesn't need to be 500,000 points for all these different trips. If you can plan it out where you are taking advantage of the deal, then you can end up being able to not really have to use that many points to be able to take trips. But obviously there's different values of points. If I'm using Hilton points, then I can easily get to 400,000 Hilton points just from, a few stays. But if we're talking about just like more credit card points, I've taken a number of trips where it's been right around about 200,000 for the entire trip.
Gotcha. So it sounds like Chase and Amex are probably your biggest two. Are there any underrated currencies that you found in your experience?
Underrated currencies? I would say that there are certain miles that I think people should start kind of looking at. Not as much like transferable currencies. I do think that built rewards is like fantastic. They're just hard to come by.
Right.
But venture miles. I know not everyone has the Venture X card, but if you can get that, the venture miles are, I would say, very good and have many different transfer partners while not domestic. There ends up just still being a lot that people could take advantage of. So, airline miles like Aeroplan or Alaskan Airlines miles, I think are ones that, while they're not transferable currencies, are things that people should look into.
What's your opinion on like earning in a bunch of different currencies versus focusing all of your spend on like one?
I like to diversify. I'm really big on that because it allows opportunity. So if I only have Chase Ultimate Rewards points, I could lose out on the opportunity of booking with Asia miles, which could end up being valuable if I wanted to book far in advance one world partners. So that is why I would want to try to spread it out. There's times where I see that American Airlines has a sweet spot that I can't book with others. So usually when I reach like a certain number of points with a program, I try to start looking at getting other points with other programs. Even if it ends up being something that I love, like Chase Ultimate Rewards points, I'll start saying, hey, what can I do to get more AA miles? And I'll start looking at their shopping portal and things like that, because they can end up being valuable if I end up seeing a flight that I want. I just don't ever want it to be at a point to where I see a deal that I want to book and I just don't have the currency to be able to do it. So that for me is the reason why I think diversification is smart in this game.
Gotcha. Does any part of that also have to do with like the worry of devaluations with like these transferable currencies or hotel or airline currencies?
I don't worry as much about devaluation. It depends on which programs, but so like a lot of the programs that at least I try to focus on, the ones that do end up having like devaluations, typically they end up still being competitive. So as long as you're taking advantage of like a transfer bonus and things like that, that to me is where I start to not worry as much about devaluations. I mean, obviously with like Hyatt moving the categories, but I'm still using their program. But there's been very few that have had devaluations where I've been like, the program is like useless now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I try to not really put all my eggs in a basket, because I guess you could have that, but I don't try to worry too much about that.
Yeah, and I guess obviously too, for the transferable currencies, you're worried a lot less in general about devaluations because you have that access to a bunch of different partners rather than just earning like Hilton points and then being worried about those devaluations. So we've already kind of touched on, you've said some buzzwords out there that people might not understand, like, for example, sweet spot redemptions or like the One World Alliance, talking about airline alliances. Can you give like a quick, I guess, crash course on like what you even mean by that kind of stuff? Because I think most people maybe consider just using their points either through a travel portal or transferring to a partner that they know works really well, like Chase to Hyatt, for example. But what are all those other opportunities that people are missing out on?
Yeah, so there are partnerships and alliances with like many of the different airlines. And what ends up happening is that although an airline may end up charging a certain amount of points, so if you want to fly with United and fly on United Polaris, they may end up charging, let's say, 100,000 points to be able to book it. But because Aeroplan is partnered with them, if United decides to release their award availability to their partners, you could end up booking the exact same seat, yet Aeroplan will not charge the identical amount of miles. In fact, in many instances, they'll end up charging less. So what you have to try to do when you're looking at the alliances is first understand who's part of which of the different alliances. An easy way to think of it ends up being that there's the big three of United, Delta, and American Airlines, and they're all going to be the heads of the different airlines. So United is with Star Alliance, Delta with SkyTeam, American Airlines with Oneworld. And then you don't need to remember all of the airlines in them. You just remember those and then see, okay, well, Japan Airlines is here. And then when you need to go to the place, then you understand who's partnered with them. But just knowing that there's different price points allows you to know that you don't actually have to pay whatever is seen specifically from the airline. You can try to figure out which other mileage program, hopefully by a transferable currency, can allow you to spend less miles required to take the exact same flight.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's that like next level up that I think a lot of people need to kind of go through. And it does take a lot of effort to learn these things in a sense, but I think it becomes second nature as well. But, for example, I think most people probably look at their transferable or the partners they can transfer to with their, Chase points, for example, and they're like, oh, well, I only fly Southwest and Hyatt. I fly with Southwest, stay at Hyatt. So I guess those are the only partners I care about. In reality, if you're booking like really any travel, you have access to all these other airlines that are in the same alliances as, for example, American, where you can make those redemptions happen. And that's something that, I've been trying to utilize more these days. But if you even like, say you understand this stuff at a high level, how do you personally go about booking those trips? Because if you, for example, you want to book a United flight, do you always go check one airline first to see if you can find a better deal? Or do you check all of the websites in that alliance? Like, how do you do that?
It depends. If I'm traveling internationally, then I'll start, to be honest, there's only a few that are actually usually competitive. Sometimes they'll end up being like weird sweet spots where you go, oh, there's Tap Portugal ends up being the miles you want to use, but it's very rare. Usually ends up being that if you're looking at Star Alliance, that it's probably going to be either Aeroplan miles or Avianca is the ones that you're going to want. It could end up being like Lufthansa, but we don't even have access to those miles here in the US, so it's not even really worth looking at. And so usually there only ends up being like a few that I would check to see what ends up being the better options. But a lot of times, if need be, I will just Google to see, hey, who has the best price point for this exact, and then I can figure out which one ends up being better. So while I do know a lot of this information, I can't keep all of it 24/7, you know. So it's like sometimes you have to kind of see who ends up having the best options. But hopefully that answered.
Yeah, I was just kind of trying to get a picture of how long it would take somebody to go do this for themselves.
Oh, yeah. Sense, you know? So I guess I would say that if you're looking for when it comes to domestic travel, I don't typically look at as many, because usually with domestic travel, even if I did end up trying to redeem my Aeroplan miles for a United flight, if I am saving something, it might not even be at that much. So it could end up making more sense in a lot of instances using something like the Chase Sapphire Reserve, because not only are you purchasing it right directly with them and you're going to be earning miles with United, you're going to be earning, so that ends up being even better than just redeeming points with something like Aeroplan. That's something that people don't factor in as much, where you have to take into consideration if you are earning points with something like the Chase Sapphire Reserve, you're not if you're going to be taking advantage of Aeroplan's ability to be able to book with United.
Yeah. Always assessing all options is the best path forward. Like I said, for my domestic trips, Chase Sapphire Reserve usually comes out on top for cent per point values, and you earn the miles with them. But then you also have to deal with the annoyances of working with a travel portal sometimes. But overall, there's just so many options out there. I want to try to make it a little bit less overwhelming for folks in a sense. Another topic on this whole transfer. I guess another part of this whole transfer topic would be transfer bonuses. Are there specific airlines that you actually will take advantage of transfer bonuses for, even if you don't have a trip planned with them?
Yeah, I've done it with Avios. So Avios is one that just because, for those who don't know, Avios, there's more than one Avios currency. So you have Avios with British Airways, you have Avios with Qatar, you have Avios with Iberia. So after you link up your accounts, you can move them around. So even if there ends up being reason why people might not want to do that is because they're worried about devaluations. Even if there ends up being some level of devaluation, usually one of the other programs will still have some type of sweet spot to where you can go, okay, well, I can just take advantage of it there. So I am big on trying to get those transfer bonuses when they are around, because if you look at something like a 30% transfer bonus, and if you were to think of your points as being like a cash out value as 1 cent per point, well, if you were to get a 30% transfer bonus, it would be like you're buying the points at 0.78 cents per point, which is ridiculously low at a price point for any of the points. So even, 1 cent per point is good, but even getting a 30% transfer bonus is fantastic. So I would say that Avios would be one that I still feel confident in every single time.
Gotcha. So transfer bonuses is one thing. What about the idea of buying points? I've talked to a couple people like Stan, for example, and Luke's Points and Miles recently about this idea of buying points. It's not something I've ever done, but I see that it can be very valuable in certain situations. So is that something you take advantage of?
So I think that buying hotel currencies such as Hilton or IHG can make a lot of sense, specifically when they're on sale. So getting Hilton points at half a cent per point, there's many instances where you can redeem that for twice the level of value. So it's almost like getting a 50% discount when purchasing those points and redeeming them at some of the top properties. Similar with IHG. When it comes to airline miles, I don't really recommend it unless you've already exhausted all of your transferable currencies. Because I believe that with the transferable currencies, that is the best deal, especially if you think of it similar to how I do, where if the points are going to be at a cash out rate right around about 1 cent, well, then you're never going to be really buying airline miles at that price. They're almost always going to be above that. So I will not recommend for people to buy points, specifically miles, unless you've already exhausted your transferable currencies. If you have exhausted them, then you can end up still having great deals of purchasing these miles and booking some fantastic flights.
Yeah, and then for the hotels, a big reason why that same logic doesn't apply is, of course, because the valuation of those hotel points are usually not worth transferring, from a Chase UR to a Marriott or from Amex to Hilton necessarily. So that would be why you wouldn't, or why you would buy points with hotels compared to airlines, right?
100%, yeah. So most other than Hyatt, if you end up looking at most hotel points currencies, they're going to be half of a cent as a value, 0.8 cents per point as a value. So to transfer the points over to them, it would make more sense. You could literally just cash them out and then pay instead to stay at that property where you'd also be earning points, which would end up being a much wiser decision as compared to transferring, say, for example, your Chase Ultimate Reward points to your Marriott account. So
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Let's say somebody kind of they have enough points to make one of their first, big bookings. How far out in advance are you usually planning your trips in order to get the best deals?
So I'm one of the people who actually does look as far in advance as I can. So I will look at something like the award calendars normally open up somewhere along the lines of like 360 to 330-ish days. So I will look at things that far in advance and try to see what I can book, because mainly there ends up being two different ways of finding award availability, like good award availability or at the cheaper price in the world of points and miles, and ends up being with looking far in advance and also just taking the best deals that end up popping up randomly. So I like to try to look as far as I can, and then I will book things, but then hopefully with miles that if I happen to not be able to take the trip, if you have something like American Airlines miles or Alaskan Airlines miles, it's either zero cancellation fee or very cheap. So take the awards when you end up seeing them available versus just not booking it at all.
And does that apply domestic and internationally, or is that just like the big aspirational trips?
That would be more the big aspirational trips. The domestic ones, because the price point, I don't think that there's really any domestic flights I look at that's like 360 days in the future. No, yeah. So domestically, those probably tend to be, I would say, a couple of months, usually right around there. Sometimes even like a couple of weeks. Someone will be like, hey, I'm in Dallas for Halloween. Yeah. Come hang out with me. I go, okay, cool. So that could be like the week before, So yeah, domestically, not as much, not as much time in advance to book it versus international.
And that's also because, what I've found is with domestic trips, most of the time you're getting a pretty fixed value. Like the average cent per point valuations that you see from the points guy for domestic airlines are basically exactly on par, unless you maybe find some business class or some kind of flights for a lot cheaper. But for the most part, there's not that many airlines that I've seen where you find just amazing deals. And when it comes to hotels, I actually usually find the best deals like the week before sometimes, which is kind of weird. Like I've joked about this before, but the best hotel redemptions I've ever gotten is whenever I help my mom book her trips, because she waits, until like the last minute. She's like, hey, I need a place to stay in Houston this weekend. Can you help me out? I'll go look at a Hyatt and it's like 10 cents per point. And of course it's because the cash value is inflated, but a lot of times, I find the best deals there. But
yeah, no, that's actually really how it goes, because so if you look at specifically even like with flights, people will go, oh, I wonder if it's going to get cheaper as we get closer to the date. It's not. It's just going to go up and up, because usually who ends up buying it is either business travelers who have to go somewhere or people who just have to go somewhere. So they used to make it cheaper as they would get closer to the date, but now they jack up the prices. However, a lot of times with points, and when you're redeeming points, they will actually end up opening up award availability. So United would be good about opening up their award availability maybe like a couple of weeks before. So even though the price is going up, the award availability for the Saver Awards ends up going down. So a lot of the times when people are talking about getting this enormous cents per point value, it ends up being because they are either booking really close to the date, or at least that's when they're looking at the price point for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, we probably should touch on the topic of cent per point values in general. And I think the best place to start would be by asking you how you actually treat cent per point values. Like is it something that you really aspire to have the highest possible value every time, or you just kind of take the trips that you normally would and then just try to get the best value there?
Yeah, so I am not big on the go for the ultra cents per point, but I'm also not as like, hey, just give me whatever's free as well. I see both sides, and I'm in the middle, and I think it makes more sense being in the middle, to where if you're just going for the free, then sometimes I think I've used this analogy before, where it's like if someone gave you $10 and you went to the grocery store to get a candy bar, and you just gave them $10 and you ran away, well, the candy bar is only $1. You didn't need to spend the entire $10 for that, so why overpay if you don't have to? And then when it comes to something that ends up being just ultra cents per point value, well, what if it's listed lower? Like I know people who have found amazing deals, but they seemed bummed out that they were only getting 3 cents per point, even though they got the exact flight on when they wanted to go and everything. And it's like, why does it matter? If it was 20 cents or this, you're still getting the exact same product. So as long as you're just okay with taking it, and if it's below a certain cents per point, then it might make more sense to use cash. But other than that, you're getting what you want. So yeah, for me, it's more of, I want to try to hit at least a base level value. After that, it's all just funny numbers. Yeah. It doesn't really, if a flight was 5,000 or 50,000, I'm not paying either of those. So
right.
it doesn't really matter.
That's a great point too. I think a lot of people also get it a little bit twisted in the sense of like your cent per point value could be really high just because, like the example I gave, you're booking a couple of days in advance. So the cash price is so high that you're thinking that you're getting an amazing deal, when in reality, if you booked that same exact trip 3 months ago, you would have used the same amount of points and gotten a much lower cent per point value. So it really is kind of just like a vanity metric in some regard. But I do like the idea of setting that baseline, which for me is like the 1.5 cents per point for domestic travel in general, or really for all travel, I guess. And then if I'm doing better than that, I'm happy. And then it's like trying to decide how to actually use those points, right?
Nice. Yeah.
What is your baseline?
I try to do with the 2 cents, and I believe, I'm not sure if this is how they came up with the math, but this is kind of how I've gotten to it. Whereas 1 cent obviously would be cashing out. 1.5 is with using a travel portal. And if you can use the travel portal and also earn points, then that means that it wouldn't really make sense to redeem any points at a level below, or sorry, transfer points to redeem at a level below 2 cents per point, because if you're getting somewhere near 1.6 or 7, well, you could be earning points instead of redeeming it. Mm-hmm. So it would make more sense to use something like the travel portal for that. But when you get over the 2 cents per point, then even if you were to use the travel portal, it still won't end up making enough sense unless you were earning, I guess, like 40% as a return on your spend through the travel portal for the points to get those points. So 2 cents per point. Obviously, we're talking about more like transferable currencies as compared to hotel points, but this is usually what I try to aim at. After that, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. So you wouldn't necessarily say that people need to focus on always getting the highest value, I imagine?
No. So one thing that I think that people should look into a lot ends up being the paying for the convenience. And this is something that I try to tell people to do, to where it's great to know the cheapest price. So knowing that you can be able to fly in business class for 60,000 points over to Europe, if you happen to be able to find it on like Aeroplan, East Coast, fantastic. But if you happen to see that, okay, well, I can be able to fly for, let's say, 75 or 80,000 points with Flying Blue, and while it is more points, it gets me to exactly where I'm wanting to go. So paying the convenience for the additional points, you'll see in like Facebook groups where people end up doing this a lot of times and they get destroyed for saying that they didn't do the cheapest price point. But I do think that paying the convenience can end up actually being really important to do, or can really just end up making your trip a lot better. Whether it ends up being like if you're looking for 2 available seats, like there may end up being 2 available seats booking with Singapore Airlines, redeeming the miles with Singapore Airlines as compared to with redeeming with Aeroplan. Aeroplan may end up being cheaper, but if you wanted to be able to find the award availability for 2 people, you're traveling you or your loved one, then book it for the more expensive to be able to get the convenience. Don't just wait around for the cheapest deal every single time.
Yeah. How have you, like, I guess, kind of traversed that psychologically? I imagine the people that you help out with this kind of stuff as well, that's probably ingrained in them to always want to get the cheapest deal. And that is what the points and miles game effectively is. So how do you kind of sway people on that?
Just say, weigh the options. I say, hey, listen, you can wait to try to book this at a cheaper deal, but you never know exactly when it end up being. It may not be at a time that you are available versus, or it's just at a time you don't really even want to travel there, versus you see it right now is at a time that you want to go. So if that ends up being the case, pay the additional points. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I am like, listen, I try to get the best deals. That's the reason why I do look to try to go far in advance. And I do look to try to go if I can find the award availability and then book it. But there's been times where I've been like, oh, let me get the cheaper deal. And I've flown from LA to New York, and then the got a delay, and then it just ended up being a disaster. And I was like, why didn't I just pay an additional $20 and I would have been in Boston immediately, instead of thinking about this whole, thing that I have to go through. So I'm not saying always do this, but I'm saying that paying for the convenience is something that shouldn't be frowned upon. Understand that you are paying the additional, but understand you're probably going to end up being happy for doing so.
And a lot of times too, you're already paying the additional to book the award seat, rather than paying for an economy ticket, depending. So it's like, if you're already paying for some convenience, why not just pay a little bit more? That's such an interesting thing. I found that, so much of this credit card game, so much of the points and miles game is psychological rather than just numbers. I think some people may approach it just as a numbers game, but that's very, I think, dangerous to do, because then you get trapped and you might start taking trips that you never would have taken, using a lot of points you never would have used just for the sake of a number on a screen, or not even a number on a screen for simple points. Kind of just up to you.
There's definitely people, because it's like, people have asked if I've flown on certain airlines and done certain things, and sometimes I haven't, and it's just like, well, I don't necessarily have plans to go to that place, and it's not something that I've even really looked that much into yet. So maybe at some point I will, but yeah, I'm not just going for the biggest cents per point. I am more focused on seeing cool places. I'm not saying I don't enjoy flying in business class. I think it's as compared to economy, it feels amazing. Mm-hmm. But for me, like I've even said before, at least on my channel, that I've enjoyed my hotel experiences more than I even have my flights. Even though my flights end up giving me significantly more cents per point, it's been great to be able to hang out with my brothers at at a hotel and just, have a good time, or at people who I've met in different places, or just, it's been fantastic at certain hotels I've been at because I remember the places where I was and had a great time. Whereas I haven't really flown much with people. And when I do fly in these business class flights, being a solo traveler, then I end up just going, okay, well, I'm doing this, but I'm just trying to get to the place to actually make those memories. So I'm not saying don't enjoy the business and first class flights, but I am saying that hopefully the place you're going ends up being even more memorable than that actual flight itself.
So I assume at this point too, let's focus in on the more aspirational stuff again. I mean, this does apply domestically too, but I'm assuming at this point you've used quite a few of the different like award search tools like Seats.Aero, Point.me, like all these different award search tools. Can you kind of give us a breakdown of each of the ones that you actually would recommend people look into?
Yeah, so for people who are more advanced, Seats.Aero is fantastic. It's the one that I use the most. I find it to be like incredible how much information it can give you in such a short amount of time. When I first was looking up awards, I would just do it the old-fashioned way. And I still recommend that people learn how to do it the old-fashioned way, because then you can understand really what you're like, everything that you're doing. But it would take so much more time. With Seats.Aero, instead of it taking me many, many hours, I can figure out like what I want in like an hour, because it just throws out all of this data. However, it is more confusing if you don't understand like the basic fundamentals of finding award availability really well. So because of that, the one that I recommend to a lot of people is Points Yeah.
Okay.
And Points Yeah, it's similar to like PointsMe. PointsMe was like one of the first ones that started off doing it. But when PointsMe first came out, I don't know how it is now, but it took an enormous amount of time to do a search. So it could take like 2 minutes for one search, and then but you can only do one day, and if you want to check the next day, now you got to. So it could take you hours. You might as well just search, not even using the thing. But then Romy came out, and they were pretty good about being fast. And then Points Yeah has been one that's I find to be an easier interface, and I think is really easy for anyone who just, if you've used Expedia, you could use this, and instead of giving you dollar amounts, just end up giving you points amounts instead.
Gotcha. And what are like the price points for each of those? I'm assuming you're probably using the pro plans for.
Yeah. It's under $100 if I remember correctly for all of them. I think Seats.Aero, if you get like the year, it's near 100, maybe it's 120.
Yeah.
But they're all near about $100. I think Points Yeah is maybe like $80. But yeah, I have the pro versions for them. You can, and with Points Yeah, you don't even need the pro version. And I think, like I tell a lot of people to use it, I just say you don't even need the pro version. The pro version is going to give you the things of alerts and other things as you start to get more advanced. But even for someone who's just trying to play around and see what award availability is out there, there's the free version of Points Yeah, and I highly recommend for people to use it.
Okay. And does that also apply to domestic trips, or is that mainly just international?
No, I also use it for domestic as well. So I had one where I did like JetBlue, where I was able to find award availability with that. And I remember looking at a day where I was traveling from Boston, and I saw that there was award space. I think it was like a day after the day I was originally thinking about leaving. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'll do that, as compared to just when I first was looking at it. So yeah, I do it for domestic. Usually it's not as many options with domestic when it comes to like great values, but I still use, and I would honestly say using something like Points Yeah is probably better for domestic as compared to Seats.Aero, where I think is really good for international, because it narrows down the very many options that are out there.
Have you made a video on your channel breaking down the difference between these before?
No, I haven't. Yeah,
I've had requests on my channel for me to do it, but I'm like, I'm still learning this process too, and I like to actually get some hands-on experience with each tool before I would make a video like that. But being that you've already done that, I feel like it could be really useful.
Yeah, I think I've went into how to do like specific award searches. So like I think when I did like finding ANA first class, like how I found that and how to go over that. So I have, I guess, used the different tools to show people how to find things, but not specifically like a breakdown of the entire tool in itself.
Gotcha. I think it'd be really nice to go through an example for both like a domestic, trip as well as a international trip, to just see like your step-by-step process in booking. We can start with honestly the trip that you helped me book here. Maybe could you just help walk people through your general processes for booking like a domestic trip, looking for award availability if it's possible?
Yeah. So because of the there's like Alaskan Airlines miles right now are great for domestic travel. And because they purchased Hawaiian Airlines, there's now a, I guess, backdoor way of transferring over your membership or points over to Alaska by first transferring over to Hawaii and then Alaskan Airlines. So honestly, when we were speaking to each other, I was already like looking into making a video about how this can end up being great for domestic travel. And one of the sweet spots that I did see was if you wanted to fly from LA over to Austin, then there ends up being different award sweet spots flying with an American Airlines flight, specifically redeeming Alaskan Airlines miles. So because of that, I knew that this would end up being the cheapest option that was out there. So that's really how I ended up looking at it for yourself, for figuring out the different flight options, even though I know you kind of went like a different path after. But I was already looking at those things. So how I end up looking for domestic travel would end up being that I do see what hubs I'm going to be flying out of. So I will look at something like if I'm flying out of obviously like San Fran, see what you have for like United. If you're flying out of maybe like Atlanta, see what's going to be there for Delta. So you would want to see what type of partners there were. And then once you end up knowing that, you could just quickly, I guess not quickly, you could go to the different search tools and see what type of options are available. So I do use the search tools quite a bit because they are just a way to not make you have to go to 10 websites. Yeah. You can just go to one. So that's what ends up being really helpful. But you have to know how to first go to the 10 websites to know how to go to the one of maybe a Seats.Aero. International trips, I guess I kind of touched on earlier, but I would end up looking for those by going to see what's available internationally, like via through Seats.Aero or something like that. And sometimes I end up just seeing what type of deals are out there as compared to just going, hey, I want to go to Japan. Like there was times where I go, I want to go to Japan, so I booked that. And there's times of me going like, hey, what's a cool place to go to? Okay, cool. Fiji has availability with Alaska miles. I don't know anything about Fiji. I mean, it's kind of close to Australia. I guess I can go to there, so I'll do that. So I do think that the people who do really well when it comes to making these cool award bookings, they're either looking really far in advance or they're just taking what they can get. They didn't have a lot of the stuff overly planned beforehand, but they see the deal and they go, what's wrong with going to Prague or something like that? So,
and I'm correct in saying that you do the YouTube and this business as well as having a full-time job, right?
Yeah, so I just retail.
Okay. So whenever you're trying to get time off for all these big trips and stuff like that, how does that work into your booking methods? Because I would imagine that, sometimes getting PTO or figuring out the best day to leave, it makes it much harder to be flexible with these, with the award searches. So how do you manage that?
So book, I guess, and then ask if you can get the availability. So especially if you're doing something that's far out, like that's the reason why I say like all the domestic trips I do, they're not very long. So it's not going to, if you have a couple of days off, you can do stuff like that when you are traveling domestically. But then people, if you have, 3 weeks off of PTO, you should be able to somehow also use in weekends to be able to make that into a decent amount of time of being able to travel throughout the year.
Gotcha. Perfect. One thing we haven't talked about, actually, I just realized, is I wanted to ask you if you pledge loyalty to any hotels or airlines in particular.
Airlines, no. Hotels, I'm a Hyatt Globalist, so I do focus more on trying to stay with Hyatt properties, specifically because they're the easiest program when it comes down to, or I guess the best program comes down to grabbing your transferable currencies and transferring over to a hotel. The other ones, you don't really get great value, as we kind of touched on earlier. But with Hyatt, you can. So that's kind of been the reason why I've focused on trying to stay with Hyatt.
Mm-hmm. And how did you, I guess, go about meeting the requirements for Globalist? Was it all based on nights stayed?
No. So, I mean, people will see that and, oh, you stay 60. No, I don't stay 60 nights. So there's different tricks out there. One, if you get the card, you're going to get 5 elite nights from having the card. You're also going to get elite nights for every $2,000 you spend on the card. On top of that, there usually ends up being promotions that I've seen like the last few years where it can end up being double elite nights if you stay at certain properties. There can end up being a fast track to getting Globalists. It's actually been a way that I've gotten Globalists. I think most of the times I've gotten it's just been the fast track. You can get that either from, I know Built Rewards had it a few years ago. There's also like if you can, I've seen it just with like corporate matches. So there's different ways to be able to I guess, game it to be able to get to that 60 elite nights.
Yeah. And would you recommend people focus on Hyatt if they're looking for, a hotel to be loyal to, or?
It depends. So if you're trying to figure out a way to not spend a lot of, because the challenge ends up being that you need a points currency. If you don't want to have to spend a lot of cash, you're going to need a points currency that you can transfer over to a hotel program to be able to take advantage of and get good deals. And it doesn't really work with any other hotel program out there. So I think that being loyal to them for that reason. But if we're talking about trying to get Globalists, I don't think most people should really even try to aim at something like that. I think getting Hilton Gold status is really good. And I think that a lot of people should just look at that because you can get, whether it's a credit here in the US or free breakfast as you travel internationally. You can be able to get that. And yeah, it's I'm not saying Globalist isn't better, but I'm saying that it could end up taking for the effort that some people end up going through, doing like ridiculous mattress runs. I don't think that ends up being worth it if you, as compared to gold status with something like Hilton, that can end up being a lot easier and give you, I'm not gonna say the same value, but not that far away from in value.
Yeah, what value do you get from your Globalist status? I know I've watched a lot of your Hyatt Globalist videos because you're one of the only people I see posting about that topic, and I found it very interesting because I feel like you kind of have. It sounds like you have a very level-headed perspective on like you don't overvalue these statuses that much, but you also don't undervalue them. So what do you personally get from it?
I would say that the value that I've gotten, so Globalist has been good when it comes to not having to pay like resort fees, because sometimes, even though I do redeem points, there's times where I am going to be using cash, and there's times you go to hotels that have those resort fees that can end up being pretty expensive, so when you can avoid that can end up being great. But then the free breakfast ends up being fantastic, along with room upgrades. Many of the times I'll end up having like a gift in my room, where it ends up being like a bottle of like wine or champagne. So this can end up being great. I love all the different things that I get as being Globalist. But honestly, what makes Globalist even, I would say, what's even as good as Globalist is the milestones reaching Globalist. Because if they didn't have the milestones, I don't think I would even try to go after it. And even some of the times I've gotten it has been through the status matches, and then I've just gotten the milestones and been able to redeem those. So getting things like the Suite Upgrade Award Certificate is huge. Now they have also the Guest of Honor, where it used to just be that you could Guest of Honor anyone just by calling them. Now you more need to like they give you like these certificates, but you can give them away to people, and then after you end up doing that, you also get an Elite Night, which ends up being awesome. So I guess that's another trick to help you get a few of those. You end up giving them away to people, and now you get a few more Elite Nights to be able to help you get to Globalist. So I think that the milestones are huge, and I think that is really more of the incentive, at least for myself, of trying to reach Globalist, because if they got rid of all those milestones, I would just be Hilton Gold with my American Express Platinum card all day.
Okay, cool. So, but at this point, you are kind of planning on trying to maintain Globalist as long as you can?
I don't know. That's a good question. Like I was looking at it and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get Globalist this year. And I think I'll be fine with it. It just comes down to if Hyatt puts out some type of like double promotion time, which like fortunately for me, sometimes it's worked out at times where I had set out to travel. But yeah, it's other programs are doing a good job at starting to close the gap a little bit. And Hyatt, as great as it is, has been kind of devaluing itself over the past couple of years. So as I see with Hilton getting small luxury hotels of the world, it really has made me look at wanting to stay more at Hilton's and not even have to worry about trying to maintain Globalist from a status match or something like that. The challenge just ends up being acquiring enough Hilton points for me to not have to consistently use cash to be able to stay at these properties. So I would just need American Express to do a bigger bonus as compared to just the 2-to-1, or I guess 1 Amex points to 2 Hilton points for me to make it make sense.
Okay, that's really interesting. I would definitely want to keep up with that on your channel just to see your decision behind that. To get really any status, I imagine it's only valid for the rest of the year after you reach the milestones, correct? Or is it like a year after that point that you hit it?
They all depend. So with Hyatt, they have it where it's like if you reach the 30 Elite Nights, you get a free night award certificate, but it's only for 6 months, which is kind of annoying as compared to like the one with the Hyatt credit card you get ends up being 1 year out. And then, but the like Suite Upgrade Award certificates, those end up being the remainder of the year, and then all the way till the end of February, the year following after. So the ones that I have aren't going to expire until February of 2026. I don't know exactly how long all the other ones are off the top of my head, but they usually end up being somewhere either between 6 months to like the February of the next year.
Okay. So when did you earn, you earned Globalist already for 2025?
I did, yeah.
Okay. And how did you do that?
I was able to do that by, I guess, stays. There was the double Elite Nights, which I took advantage of they did like Dream Hotels, and I can't remember which other one it was, like Thompson's, but I just happened to have, or I guess technically I didn't. I had other hotels booked and then I switched over. It was in the same area.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me get double Elite Nights if I can, because I was like, I don't think I'm going to get Globalist from it outside of that. Yeah. And then that was mainly what it is. I guess I could say like I did like a few nights where it was like a little bit of a mattress run, just because I don't stay enough nights. But it ended up being able to do it at a cheaper price point. I was visiting a friend at the exact same time, so it all kind of worked out. So I wouldn't say for people to do massive mattress runs, but I don't know if people already know what mattress runs is, but you go to a place, you kind of check in, you get the heck out of there, and you get the Elite Night. So Yeah, so I did a little bit of that as well. That's how I was able to get it.
Gotcha. Okay. So obviously you're going to be, super well traveled at this point, taking a lot of international and domestic trips. What have been some of your favorite destinations that you'd recommend, like someone like me go do?
Japan. Japan's been my favorite place that I've ever traveled to. Then there's different parts. You can go visit Tokyo, which ends up just being an incredible city. But then there's also Kyoto, Osaka, really fun places to go to. Super safe. So you could literally be walking around at 3 o'clock in the morning as a tiny woman and you don't have any fear. The people there are very nice and the public transportation is amazing. And in my opinion, it's the best food in the entire world. So that's somewhere where I would say to travel to when it comes to international. Yeah. And I also loved like Japan Airlines I've flown with. It's been my favorite airline that I've been with. I know it's not the like as luxurious, I guess some people would say, is something like an Emirates or even like an Etihad, at least for the older product. But the service has just been absolutely incredible. So that's somewhere where I would say 100% I recommend anyone to go to. Domestically, I guess I'm not sure exactly where you've been domestically. It's funny because when people ask me, when I meet people overseas where to go domestically, I go to Texas.
Oh, yeah.
I go, it's the best food in the entire country, so go there. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of places I've been domestically that I like LA. I know not everyone has a good thought of it. There's some things that aren't the greatest out here, but if you want to go snowboarding, you could just drive for a couple hours. You can go snowboard. You can go down to the beach, go to the Comedy Store. There's all great things kind of out here that you can do as well. So
yeah, nice. So you said you flew Japan Airlines mainly. There's a lot of different routes I imagine to get to Japan. Isn't that like also like the ANA, the room, like that whole redemption is out to Japan as well?
Yeah. So ANA, if you fly on their newer product, they have the room and the suites, which is their first class. The room ends up being like it's the most spacious business class. So that's what a lot of people like about it. So yeah, it like feels like I've actually never flown it, but from what I've seen, it seems like it's like almost the amount of space that you get from like a first class product. But that can end up being one to where if you are looking for award availability, I have seen that something like flying out of, if they happen to have the newer product, flying out of Chicago ends up having it more frequently. The only route that is like consistent with it is from New York. But there is one if you were to fly out of Dallas with Japan Airlines that has the newer product. So they have the newer, it looks like one of the best first class products out there. They have a massive screen that I believe is the biggest screen on any airplane right now for your own seat. And then when it comes to if you're flying out of specifically Japan, you get the Salon champagne that's like over $1,000 a bottle, which is just insane. I can't tell the difference. But
yeah.
I'm told it's $1,000 a bottle. So
yeah.
But yeah.
Gonna put that one on the bucket list then for sure, especially if it's out of DFW.
And for with American Airlines miles, it only end up being 80,000 American Airlines miles. I don't know exactly what it is for Alaskan. I want to say like 110,000 Alaskan Airlines miles. And then you also could book it with other oneworld partners like British Airways, where if you can take advantage of a transfer bonus, you could get it with British Airways for, it ends up being somewhere near about 100,000 Avios, but then there's also higher tax fees with them.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's just crazy. There's so many different options. And you can, each one has completely different taxes and fees associated as well as point valuations. But yeah, that's Japan is, I feel like the one place where if you're in the points and miles game, you should at some point try to make it out there. I feel like it's kind of like whenever I think about traveling internationally with points, it's like to Japan.
It's just a wonderful place. I hope that I can go there for at least like a couple of days every year for the rest of my life. Because even like, I don't really have any plans to go to Japan right now for 2025, but I have like, I'm hoping maybe I can try to do a trip over to Asia. And I was like, well, let me try to go to Japan just for a couple of days before I head home, just because that's how much I love that place. It's just fantastic.
Cool. Well, I want to transition a little bit into like the credit card side of things. We talked a lot about the travel and touched on the credit card stuff, but we don't really know fully how you treat your credit card applications and what cards you have and such. So let's just start by me asking how many cards you've applied for at this point.
In total, I have no idea. It's been a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can tell you like, there's been some years where like, for instance, last year, I don't know how many I applied for, but I got approved for 6 different cards.
Okay.
But I did get denied for a number of them at the end of the year. So, but I apply for quite a bit just because if you get denied, you get denied. It's not really that big of a deal. It's like approaching a woman. Hey, if she denies you, okay.
Yeah.
It is. But yeah, I've gotten dozens of cards throughout my life. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any of those that you've regretted applying for?
I wouldn't say regretted. There's been like timing where I've been like, oh, well, I got that. Now I'm over 524. So now I kind of have to wait to get this Chase card. So if I just worked it correctly, then I could have been able to time out getting a certain elevated welcome offer and things like that. So because every card that I've gotten, I've been able to take advantage of at least the welcome offer in some way that it's been able to give me a trip. So there's no card I really regret getting. I can just more say the timing of the cards. I guess technically I accidentally one time got a Quicksilver card that was the one that gives you the annual fee. So I guess I can say I regret it. I forgot about that until just right now.
Yeah.
Like, because the Quicksilver cards is like 4 of them.
Yeah.
And one of the times I applied, this is years ago, and I got the one that had annual fee. And I was like, why would I get that if I could get the one that doesn't? And they were like, that's the one you, so that was a whole thing.
Capital One. I mean, I think that's probably everybody's biggest regret a lot of times is people getting the, cards for good credit.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what are we doing here? Which ones that you have currently have had the highest return on investment for the way that you travel?
I think the American Express Platinum card has been one has really given me a lot of value. Not only because like 5x back on flights. I mean, while I do try to redeem points for domestic travel, there's a decent amount of domestic travel where I'll just end up booking with cash. So being able to get the 5x back on flights ends up being great. And then I can take advantage of most of the credits, usually to get very close to that, hitting that annual fee. So that just makes it that when I do end up having the lounge access, it just ends up being gravy on top. Mm-hmm. So that's one that I don't think is for everyone, but it's one that has given me a ton of value.
Okay. And do you also have like hotel and airline cards too? Or are you mainly focused on transferable currency cards?
So I have the World of Hyatt card and I have the Aeroplan card, which I think can end up being good even if you don't happen to be flying Aeroplan, because it has like a way to give you value that if you want to do something similar to like using the travel portal, you can do it with Aeroplan to be able to get yourself, if you are taking advantage of the transfer bonus, even more value than what something like the Chase Sapphire Reserve gives you. Mm-hmm. So that is one that I think I'm going to be keeping for a while because, as I said, like I'm not sure how much I'm going to end up being Globalist for as much longer. So because of that, if I'm looking to try to stay at certain hotels, well, if I can get 1.6 cents per point and then also be able to earn hotel points with the card, then I'll look at something like the Aeroplan card where I can transfer my Chase points over to something like that. But the other airline cards that I've gotten, it's just mainly been for welcome offers because they don't earn very well. Yeah. I do think that Hilton cards can end up being great if you stay at Hilton properties. So getting something like an Aspire or Surpass. The only thing that's really kept me from keeping them is the Platinum gives me gold status. So
yeah, so not big competitive advantages there for you. So it sounds like you don't necessarily just stick to domestic like hotel and airline cards. I mean, I guess hotels are both international and domestic, but you will go for an international airline card if it fits your trips coming up, right?
I could, yeah. I mean, I haven't gotten something like the Air France card, but I have looked at that, being like, hey, it's got a bonus that can give me a business class flight over to Europe, so why not do that? But the Aeroplan card, while it is like an international card, it just works so well, even if you don't happen to be flying with Aeroplan, because you can just take advantage of this other sweet spot. They did kind of, I'm not gonna say nerf it, but they reduced the ability to be able to take advantage of this, like pay yourself back. Yeah. Only being $2,000 as compared, or is it 200,000 points, somewhere right around there, as compared to before it was unlimited. So I was never using it to that level, but I have spoken with people who have used it to like a really high degree, and they've gotten themselves tons of value from it. So yeah.
Yeah, can you explain that system really quick with the pay yourself back on that card?
So how it works is that with the Aeroplan card, you get a 1.25% back, very similar to like the Chase Sapphire Preferred. The only difference with this card is that you don't actually have to use any travel portal. So you use it for travel and you get 1.25% back. And how you can end up getting even better value than that is that Chase seems to have at least one time a year a transfer bonus to Aeroplan. So you can transfer over your Chase Ultimate Reward points over to your Aeroplan account, and they have a 20% transfer bonus, plus the card gives you an additional 10%. So you end up getting a 30% transfer bonus over to Aeroplan. Mm-hmm. And if you use that card after you've done that transfer bonus, then it effectively comes out to the math of being 1.625 cents per point. So not only do you not have to use the travel portal, but you end up getting also a higher percentage back, and you're going to be earning points if you happen to be staying at hotels. Whereas if you use the travel portal with something like the Reserve or the Preferred, you wouldn't be earning points or getting any of your status.
Right. So you're saying that that's just by booking in cash on your card and using the pay yourself back feature to get that valuation.
For travel, correct.
Yeah, which is better than you would get by using a portal. So yeah, I've heard a lot about that recently, because I think of the little nerf that they did to it. I didn't know about that before then, but it's made me consider it too. But the 524 thing with me is just tough with the personal cards and everything. So we'll see about that. But going back to your Amex Platinum card, can we do like a rough comparison between like the big three, for example, of the transferable currencies with the Amex Platinum, Chase Sapphire Reserve, and Venture X, and how you kind of think about each of those?
So we're going to be looking at, so you said Amex Platinum, Venture X, and
Chase Sapphire
Reserve. Sorry, yeah. So I would say that the Venture X is the one that I recommend to most people. I think that it ends up being the easiest card out there to get yourself positive value from. You have a $300 travel credit. Sure, you have to use the travel portal, but I have found it to be easy to just book a couple of things, whether it be a hotel stay or a flight, and then be able to cover the entire thing. And then you get 10,000 points each year. So just by doing that, you end up getting lounge access to the Capital One Lounge and also Priority Pass, and then you earn 2x back on everything. That's one that I recommend to a ton of people, and I really feel like the only people who talk negatively about it are people who don't have the card. The American Express Platinum card is one that I tell people that, this is a card that you can get good value from, but you really have to be paying attention.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to have the Platinum card, but then if you're using it to spend on everything, you're getting 1x back everywhere. And then just credits you have to remember to use every month. It's just not for everybody. So I don't recommend it to all like that many people. But I do think that if you do end up focusing on taking advantage of all the different perks, you can end up getting more value than the other cards. And then the Chase Sapphire Reserve is actually one that I would say that probably most of my friends have. I think the Chase Sapphire Reserve ends up being a card that if you want simplicity and you also spend a decent amount, I find that card to be useful. I have friends who work in tech out here in LA, and they just use the Chase Sapphire Reserved, and they just use the travel portal. They ask me about hotels. They transfer over to Hyatt, but they're not trying to get many cards. They're not into points and miles. They just want a single card, and that card works out well for them. So not being able to transfer any domestic airlines and not even wanting to try to learn some of these things, then they just go, it's simple. Like I remember I had a lawyer friend who he was kind of saying like, because of how much money he makes, it almost mathematically doesn't make sense for him to even try to figure some of the stuff out. So he just is like, yeah, it just makes more sense for me to do this because the amount of hours for me to learn this, I would rather just put that towards being able to book the flights.
Yeah, right. And making money on that. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's such an interesting way to think about it. I'm definitely not at that point yet where I can worry about that. But yeah, so each one of those cards, also the big thing is that they offer different lounge access, right? So you have the Amex Platinum with the Centurion Lounge, the Chase Sapphire Reserve, the Chase Lounges, Venture X for the Capital One Lounges. They all have Priority Pass as well, and some other lounge access on top of that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on just overall, like the state of lounge access these days.
Yeah, so I would say that the Platinum card has been having some issues where it's kind of getting harder to get in. I still think it ends up being great because if you are going to be booking with like Delta, you can still have access to Delta. And if you are traveling internationally, then it ends up being easier. But I would say that probably the Venture X right now is one that I've heard that, because I was trying to go to one before, but then I ended up I was about to miss my connection. So I was just like, I can't even go to it. But the reason why that lounge, not only because that lounge look really nice inside, but they have the grab and go. So not everyone actually wants to sit down and lounge. Sometimes people just want to get the free food. So they go in there, they're able to get that. So it usually isn't going to be as filled as something like the American Express Centurion lounges. So, but the challenge ends up being they just don't have enough of them. So as they start to open up more and more, then I would say that that's going to end up making probably Capital One become one of the more sought out ones to go to. I have been to different Sapphire lounges in Boston, this one, and I found those to be nice. Yeah. But they also have like Priority Pass connected to it, so they also can fill up pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah. How often are you going to a lounge these days and not having to wait? I feel like it's almost more frequent that we have to wait these days.
It depends. What I've noticed, like if you do business or first class, you're not waiting.
Right.
You're pretty much always getting in. I've never had one that they've been like, hold on, we're too at capacity. But when I've had the Centurion Lounge here at LAX, there's only been one time where I actually had to wait, which people might find surprising. But I've been to like Vegas a few times, and it's almost like it's impossible to get in there. It's always like a half an hour or something like that. So I've seen a lot more people talk about it online, and I don't know if it's because of where it's located here at LAX to where it's at the like international spot. So people who happen to be flying with American or United or any of these different things, they don't really want to walk all the way over there. It's the same thing for myself. If I'm flying with United, I'm like, I'm not going to the lounge. It's a 30-minute walk. I'm not doing that to get some free food.
Yeah, right.
At least, yeah, mostly, especially with my luggage and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say that for me, it hasn't been horrible. There has been a couple of times I've had to wait. Priority Pass has been, I would say it's more than 50% chance that I have to wait. So that one has been challenging. But yeah.
Do you still think it's worth people, I guess, pursue lounge access right now?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's just because if you are going to be someone who may possibly spend money at the airport, then it can end up up paying for itself. It also depends on how much you're traveling. If you get something like the Capital One Venture X, easily makes sense because you just use $300 credit and also get the 10,000 points. It's going to cover itself. The lounge access is just gravy. Even if you don't access it, you're still positive. The Platinum card is where it starts to become more questionable because then it's like, okay, how many times you're visiting? Because depending on how many credits you're using, that can all factor in. So I would say it does come down to really thinking about how many times you're going to try to access these lounges. Obviously, if you're traveling one time a month, then sure, you should try to get one of those especially if it happens to be at your home airport. But if you're traveling twice a year, then other than if it's not for the Capital One Venture X, then I would say don't do it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Another thing that I've kind of been wondering about is how do you, I guess, recommend people look at choosing a premium travel credit card, especially when it comes to this lounge access? Like, for example, if somebody can easily get positive value from the Venture X, but they have no Capital One lounge in their home airport, is that still worth pursuing? Or do you think it
depends on how much they travel. I would still say yes, because you still get priority pass. And then you still may go through a Capital One lounge at some point. Yeah, because I know of people who have something like the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which doesn't give them any access at LAX, but they still will travel to places where it can end up being helpful. So it really comes down to how much you travel. Because I also know a lot of people who happen to, at their home airport, don't even really want to access it. And even for myself, when I happen to be flying out of LAX, there are times where I'm just like, hey, I'm just getting to the airport right before because I know this airport really well. Whereas if I happen to be at a foreign airport, not even specifically like international, but just an airport I'm not accustomed to, I try to get there earlier because I don't know how the TSA pre-check is going to work. I don't know if there's clear, if there's any of these different things. So I usually end up accessing lounges even more when I'm coming back to home as compared to when I'm leaving because I just don't know the layout of the airports very well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's a really great way to think about it because I'm the same way. Talk about that in a video I'm posting, around the time of recording. I'm not sure when this will get posted, but I have always kind of put a heavier emphasis on the home lounge or the home airport, making sure you have a lounge there, which I do think is a right way to consider it. But I'm at the same time not somebody that wants to get to the airport super early at an airport that I know really well.
Yeah.
Like I just want to get on the flight. So a lot of times I end up running into the lounge, grabbing food and leaving. But that's also specific to my airport. I'm in Austin, which is not as big of an airport as LAX. So for me to go get food, it takes 10 minutes to walk there and back, But yeah, super interesting. How do you balance? So if you're traveling internationally too, you will get, certain lounges, you'll have certain access to lounges if you're flying business or first class, no matter if you have a card that gets you into those or not. So at that point, does that change your decision making on who should be looking for it?
Or sorry, repeat the question?
Like it does the fact that you get lounge access by traveling in business or first class,
yes.
Like whenever I traveled to Croatia, I got Air France lounge access because I was flying in business class. So at that point, it makes, the lounge access even less needed internationally.
Yeah. That has actually made me think about that to where when I have if I am going to be flying in business and first class, especially internationally, then I don't really take advantage of having the Platinum card, the Centurion Lounge, any of that. So in that instance, I have thought to myself, should I end up canceling it? But there's enough domestic economy travel. Although you may end up seeing it on Instagram or on YouTube that I'm flying in business. I do domestic way more than I do business and first class because I'm mainly if I'm traveling around the US, I'm going to be doing it domestic. I'm not going to if I'm going to Vegas, I'm not doing first class. So because of that, I like to get the lounge access with one of the cards. But if you were someone who was just going to be mainly traveling in premium cabins for the majority of your trips, then I don't think it would make a ton of sense to get yourself one of the premium cards, at least specifically for the lounge access.
Yeah. Okay. So at this point, you've obviously applied for a lot of cards. You have basically everything you probably ever need covered. How do you go about road mapping out your, future card additions? Is it just based on the trips you have coming up, or what does that for you?
I do a few different things. So usually I'll see what I think are going to be strong points or miles at that moment. Like right now, I see Alaskan Airlines miles as being an awesome program to try to acquire as many points as I can. So because of that, my main focus is get American Express points so I can take full advantage of this. But then, I try to move as much as I can with how everything else is kind of flowing. So there can end up being times to where you go, hey, for example, I have a wedding that I happen to be going to, and the person's getting married at a Marriott property. And I remember being like, oh, I got to get this card so I can stay at this because I don't want to spend $400 a night to stay at this property, and I got to be there for 3 days. So I'm like, I really hope I can get this Marriott card. So this ends up working out for my travel. So sometimes it does end up being for the trips I do need to take, but then other times it will just end up being, where is the sweet spot right now as this ever moving and evolving game is going right now.
Getting into it just a little bit more specifically here, we have another member's question from Matt Clausen, and he asked, is there a card that you're excited to apply for this year, existing or rumored?
The rumor card would end up being the Alaska Premium card. That card looks like it could end up being really strong. It's got all these different little things I can't remember off the top of my head, but because of how much I find Alaska miles to be valuable, while I do find American Airlines miles to be the most valuable, I think because of how much easier it is right now to get Alaska miles, that it makes more sense to just try to focus on those.
Mm-hmm.
So having that card and being able to redeem their miles is, for me, the card that I can think of where I'm like, oh, I'd really like to get that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what about, like, is there any other existing that you have on your roadmap currently?
There is, well, I've been looking at the Blue Business Plus card.
Okay.
That is one that I want to get, but I want to kind of waiting for an elevated offer with it, just because I would like to have a 2x back American Express card. But also, if I happen to not want to have my Platinum card, which I have, even though I get good value from it, I do have to consistently keep on maintaining focus to make sure that I do. So I have thought about, well, if I want to cancel, I want to be able to keep my membership reward points alive. So the Blue Business Plus card is definitely a current card that I'm like, this is going to be one that is going to make sense to just keep long term and get it when you can, at least hopefully when there's an elevated offer.
All right. What cards are you using on a daily basis right now?
So I have the Venture X that ends up being my 2x catch-all. I have my American Express Gold card, which funny enough, at first when they did the changes to it, I was like, I don't know how much I'm going to keep this card. But then I realized that actually I go to Resi restaurants.
Yeah.
So that ended up helping out. I think just because I'm in a big city, that some of the places that I visit end up just falling into Resi. It's not even like I'm going out of my way. It's like a sports bar that I went to is a Resi. So I'm like, cool. And then I also have, those are like the main ones that I use, I guess, daily. But I have my Hyatt card in my wallet that doesn't get used unless I'm traveling to a Hyatt. I do have typically I have my Aeroplan card because I have been looking at if I want to try to have travel be covered. And then I have my Chase Freedom Flex card to get 5x right now, I think in groceries.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
Yep. Built card?
No, I don't have the Built card. I have talked a decent amount about Built, but I don't have that card.
Gotcha. That sounds like a pretty solid setup overall, though. Yeah. I'm curious to know, too, what would it take for you to consider going the cashback route? Do you think you ever would do that?
If there was a high enough cashback card that I guess I could just purchase the points from the amount of cashback that I was getting, then it could end up making sense. But I don't think I'd end up going full because even if I did do that, usually there ends up being caps on how much points you can buy as you do it. But I have gotten myself cashback cards even just like in the last year. I got the US Bank triple cash card, the business card. So I do think that getting cashback cards, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I do also think that earning cash back to be able to help supplement some of your different travel costs, because while traveling with points and miles can end up being a ton of fun and it does reduce the cost significantly for airfare and hotels, travel is still expensive.
Yep.
You know, just getting to the airport, taking Uber can end up adding up if you're going there and back at different locations. So I'm not opposed to cashback. It's just my main focus more is how can I be able to take different trips for the lowest cost out there.
Okay. Got another member's question for you, funny enough. And this one comes from Nick. And he said, concerning US Bank, do you think it should be an in-game goal to settle down with one bank and one card, specifically US Bank, in achieving getting approved for the Smartly card?
Do I think it's smart to settle? No, I mean, I don't think it's bad to get this card.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a couple different things, a couple different questions there.
Yeah.
So getting the card itself, I think, can end up being smart, especially if you can get yourself $100,000 in investments with the US Bank as a whole, because then you can end up getting 4x back on all your purchases, which to me is just fantastic. That ends up being great. I don't think that it's sustainable. So I wonder how much time they're going to have it before they end up adding a cap to that. But I wouldn't say it's an end game. Honestly, if you happen to have I don't even know if you can do this, but if you happen to have a US Bank card, I would product change to it other than maybe like the Altitude Reserve, where that one's more that one that people like right now and you can't reapply for it. But if you happen to have a different US Bank card, I would product change over to that card. And if you can end up having your $100,000 in investments, then it could end up making sense for it. The card doesn't have a welcome offer, so just product changing, in my opinion, would end up making more sense as compared to giving up a 524 slot and inquiry and everything like that. But no, I think that card is a beast of a card and can end up being the perfect card for when you are in between working on welcome offers like myself. Like I'm not working on anything at the moment. So if I happen to have a card like that, that could end up being great. But my whole feeling about the card is I just don't think it's sustainable. I think that if you look at something like US Bank had the Altitude Go, and they used to have 4x back on, I believe, dining that was uncapped. And then they, not too long ago, capped it at 2,000. So it's not like US Bank is unheard of to be able to add these caps. It's something that they've previously done. So I don't see why they'd do it at something like this, especially since I don't think it's mathematically can make sense for, like, I don't spend a lot of money, but there's people who spend a ton of money that can get way too much back at 4x back. So take advantage of it while it's here.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think another like important note about that card when thinking about it compared to a travel earning setup is, you would take a 2x mile card like the Capital One Venture X, but in order to get that 4% cash back that you would get with the Smartly, you got to be redeeming your points at 2 cents per point every single time. So for somebody traveling more domestically and not finding any like award availability for anything like that, I mean, it seems like it would make a lot of sense to just use a flat card like that. Of course, under the assumption that you put the 100,000 in U.S. banks, possession. But
yeah, and then also, so with that, if you were to look at the reason I said it also like you could buy points is because most of the times, other than like American Airlines, when points are going to be on sale, they end up being under 2 cents per point. So this is the reason why if you were to use this card over something like the Venture X, then it could make sense because you're going to end up buying the points for cheaper than what you would have been getting if you were just to like cash out and transfer over to the points. So because of that, this can end up beating out a 2x card like a Venture X, like a City Double Cash, for how many points you could end up getting, miles you could end up getting specifically with the different airlines. The challenge ends up being that there's a cap for a lot of these different miles you can end up buying. Also, you have to get them on sale. And I don't think it's sustainable for US Bank.
Right. I agree. As I mentioned earlier, you've been, in the YouTube space, at least posting as of 7+ years ago. Of course, it wasn't super consistent back then, but you've been on the YouTube space for quite some time. How have you seen the credit card YouTube space evolve specifically?
I do think that it's really positive. I'm not saying it wasn't positive before, but I've seen a lot of people who are connecting, just like how we are right now having this conversation. Whereas I didn't see that when I first was looking into it. In fact, I remember that there was some people who, a lot of them aren't even really in credit cards anymore. But I remember seeing people who were like, if you commented on one of their channels, and this didn't happen to me, but I saw it with other people, then they were like, oh, you're coming over here to try to get clout and things like that. So I always thought like, oh, I'm not even supposed to comment on people's channels, even if I like their content. So it was funny for like a long time. I was like, oh, I like Daniel's work. And I didn't even end up commenting on his videos because I was like, well, I'm smaller than him, so I don't want him to think that I'm coming. And I've met him before. I don't think he would ever even think that. No. So I don't know exactly. Maybe it was just a one-off and I saw that. And I don't know. I'm not really as much online as I am a people person.
Yep.
But just seeing how much there's been a community within the points and miles now on YouTube as compared to before, I felt like it was more that everyone was on their own. And
yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I've only been in this space, I guess, for like 3 or so years now, but even in that amount of time, I've seen so much more collaboration and stuff like that. And that's why I try to foster it as well, because I think it's great. I mean, the whole point of us making these videos is to share our unique perspective. But I think what's even better than that is being able to see each other's perspective in real time, if that makes sense. So like me and you sitting here talking about our travel habits, people can, see maybe they resonate a lot with your travel style and they should be watching your videos. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that we should always be aspiring to, lift all boats with the rising tide, Now, speaking of, where do you see the space going, say, over the next 7 years of being here?
Where do I see the YouTube space going over the next 7 years? That's a good question. So I wonder how much AI is going to play into it. That's really where I start to think that I've seen on other channels outside of specifically credit cards where people are starting to more put their face into things, which ends up being fantastic because now this is the selling point of the channel is you. People see it, they want to see Spencer, so they go and check out Spencer versus where a lot of times can end up being a voiceover of a thing. But there's so much YouTube now where I'm seeing it where I'm like, this is just an AI voice doing the entire thing. And it's like, oh my goodness, it's kind of scary because it's like people can do, I don't know how many, maybe thousands of channels where they're just somehow doing AI all around over and over. Whereas I guess technically there may end up being a point where they could AI your face, but you could, be able to do some type of litigation against that. Right. So, but I'm very curious of where AI comes into it for that. But when it comes to points and miles, I would say that also somewhat with AI, seeing how much they're going to end up possibly changing when it comes to our applications and being able to apply for, because maybe AI can now more say, hey, we know how you apply, and somehow maybe the other banks can communicate with each other and make it so that welcome offers aren't going to be as lucrative for each person. They might even have it specific for each person. So that's something where I'm curious about how much more either individualized things may end up coming with the banks for the different people who are applying for the cards, or how when it look at YouTube itself, more, I think we're going to end up seeing a lot more where someone's face makes a big difference. I think it already does, but I think it's going to make even more.
How do you plan on differentiating yourself in that time? Because I do think you're right. I mean, I think even if you take AI out of the equation, there's just more and more people, making credit card YouTube content on a daily basis. So how do you plan to stand out?
I think it has to come down to more of the human touch. So that's something that I'm even trying to change more in my own videos, where I've been mainly just information based. So even some of my content that you looked from previously, the quality of the videos and things like that just haven't been very good. And it more came down to me going, this is the information people want. Let me just get that. Because when I first started making videos, I remember telling myself, if I try to make the videos too perfect, it's going to take me 3 weeks to make a video, and I'm never going to end up releasing the video. So I said, let me just more worry about releasing it and make sure that people can get it. But now I've been more than like, okay, let me make sure that people feel more connected and have a human connection with me, and the quality looks good and everyone feels really happy about what they're watching, while also the information is good. Sure, it does take more time, so I'm not going to be able to release videos at the same quantity maybe as previously. But I do think that that's going to end up having the connection and really what's going to draw more people to the thing, because AI is too perfect at this moment. It doesn't really have at least in my opinion, a very human touch.
Yeah. Speaking of personal connection, I think that's a big, I can tell that you're focusing more and more on that in your videos. Not only that, but you've also recently released a course and just overall program to help people book similar trips to you. And that's obviously a very personal connection that people can have with you. Can you talk more about that? I know it's a recent launch at the time of us recording.
Yeah, so I created a course called Points Travel 101. You go to pointstravel101.com. And with this course, what it's going to allow people to do is save an enormous amount of time for trying to find award availability. Because when I first started in this, I was spending quite a bit of time just trying to figure out, how does this whole thing even work? And if I just had a course like this, it would have saved me hundreds of hours of trying to figure out how all of this works. So this ends up being something where people can go to, and you don't have to just necessarily be a beginner, because there ends up being different sections that you can jump to depending on what level you feel that you want to go to. So if you want to go there and just learn about the basics of earning points, then you can. But for someone like yourself, you're already well past that. So get into a place of going, well, how do I figure out how to book partner airlines specifically for the cheapest and be able to find the award availability? You could jump to that and jump to even a specific section for where you may be wishing to travel to. So this course is it's mainly out there to help people feel confident with making the award bookings, but also saving them an enormous amount of time of trying to figure out how to find all this award availability. So I've already spent the time, so you don't have to.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Stan in our interview about how both of us always use you as like our resident expert when it comes to booking trips. And it's like, okay, well, this is perfect. Now we have permanent access to JP and his knowledge base through the course. And I'm really excited personally to even like take a dive into it myself, because even though, we are technically more experts than the normal person when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm still constantly learning. You're also constantly learning. And I'm sure that's going to, continue to make that program better and better for folks. So super stoked for that. So also at the same time, I know you've been trying to reach people in other domains as well. You make the videos, obviously, which are going to be the main focus. You have the course now to help people out, but where else can people kind of find you?
Yeah, so if you go to Points Travel 101, or pointstravel101.com, I have a newsletter. So I have been with the newsletter sending out different like award deals that I found. So right now it's just a free newsletter. Just go on there, put in your email. And that's something where I think can end up being really helpful. I'm also looking at doing a blog. So I have been writing out like blogs for a lot of the different videos that I've been making. But I have noticed that there are people who, while they do like watching, there's a decent amount of people who just like reading things. So I am trying to have certain things that are blog posts. And while I haven't put on pointstravel101.com yet, I am going to be having a section to where I'm going to have it so that you can read either some of the things similar to the videos I made, or just things that I don't think can end up being very, maybe entertaining as a video, but could end up being entertaining for something to read.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you've obviously grown quite a bit over the last few years of being on the YouTube space to be able to, be saying these things. I think, it's something that I've always aspired to do is expand the business past just the videos. And it's just, I'm really, happy to see your growth over the last few years that I've been here. But, say there's somebody out there that's looking to start making content, or maybe they already are, but they're trying to get better at it. What advice would you have for those creators?
If someone's looking to try to make content, so do not take so long of just, let me try to make the first video perfect. It's okay to make things and not have them be great. It's kind of the same thing even when you are looking to try to make an award booking. Everyone's like, is this the best deal ever? Sure, you should try to look to see if you can get a good deal, but at the same time, it's better to just book something that is going to work as compared to nothing at all. So I would say that for anyone who is trying to get into the YouTube space, or specifically even just the credit card YouTube space, start making your content, just start making it. It's probably not going to be great when you first start. And then have your own sort of human touch, because there will end up being a lot of information that's going to cross over. You know, there's sometimes where I make a video, but I don't always like release it immediately. But you might have a video that comes out as I just recorded it. And I'm like, well, this is identical. So now as soon as I release it, everyone's going to go, look at JP trying to copy Spencer over here. But sometimes things just overlap and you just have to figure out what is it that's going to differentiate yourself from others out there.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I know you also manage this YouTube channel and business alongside a full-time job, like we touched on earlier. How do you manage to do that?
Well, there's times where I'll have pockets of slowing down with videos. So I think what I'm trying to now more do is, instead of like creating a bunch of videos and then having like a space to where I'm just not releasing them, I'm going to try to more batch or backlog some different videos and then try to make videos more release once a week or something like that, versus there used to be times where I would go, oh, let me make all these and then just release 3 videos a week. And I don't think that the numbers end up even doing much better or anything like that. So kind of slowing down when it comes to the release. And then just keep on grinding.
Yeah. What does a normal day in the life look like for you, in the same vein of, you know, working a full-time job, then trying to do the YouTube thing? Do you split it up on weekends versus weekdays, or how does that work?
Days off. So if I end up having days off, so when I have a day off where I'm not recording, then I might be traveling. Mm-hmm. So it ends up being something like that. But then, so you'll notice a lot of times, like people who watch my videos, like sometimes I'll try to do it in my, like before I was more kind of trying to do it in the, like the studios, or not studio, but just like the section where I have the different, what do you call them? Paintings behind me. Yeah. But I've been more like, okay, let me try to do it during the day on a day off and then try to record those videos. But what you're saying, like the day in the life?
Yeah. Like scripting.
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah. So I would begin in the morning of I wake up, and first thing I always do is exercise. So I'm either going to be going to the gym or I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then after that, go to work. After I come back from that, I usually just try to like write out something in points and miles. It's I won't say I do it every single day, but I try to. I'm usually always writing down these notes. And as I said before, like I never do like full scripts, even though now I'm more kind of turning them into blogs. And then when I have free time to be able to record, sometimes I do it at night. Sometimes I'll do it if it's a day off during the day. And that's when I end up doing it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I guess whenever you're traveling, you're sometimes working as well, depending on the trip, of course. Right. Like you're working on the plane and actually filming stuff for people to see on the channel. So it seemed like you've naturally integrated it pretty well into your lifestyle. Now, at this point, what can people expect to see from your channel over the next like 12 months?
I think I know what people are going to be seeing is going to be better quality content that's going to be more engaging. I'm going to try to be adding in more humor as well. And then, it's hopefully going to be things that people find incredibly helpful. I try to mix between videos of doing things that are more for beginners, but also things that can end up being more advanced. So depending on where you are in this game, hopefully there should end up being something on my channel that ends up being helpful and useful for you.
Mm-hmm. And then on the business side of things too?
The business side of things, I want my course to be able to go out there more to people. And then I'm also going to be with the blog coming out as well. So, that's mainly the focus, is just going to be that. And then the newsletter, trying to get people more information. But I'm hoping that a lot of people want to actually start taking the trip and not just see the points balance rise and rise.
Yep.
And because of that, they'll end up getting Points Travel 101 and save themselves a ton of time.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how your business continues to grow. I think your channel by itself is extremely valuable, but all these other added benefits you're giving folks is amazing. So yeah, I'll be excited to do it. Thank you for joining us today. I think people got a ton of value from this. I know I personally did. I was basically asking selfish questions here to learn from you. But yeah, I just really appreciate you enlightening us here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it as well.